Hi everybody, Colin from the Bike Dads here, and today we're taking a look at the Canyon Young Hero. It's a 27.5-inch youth full suspension bike with 130 millimeters of front travel and 130 millimeters of rear travel. Let's have a look. So when you're about to take the jump into the 27.5-inch wheel side for kids, it can be quite frustrating finding a bike that fits. That is, having the appropriate reach and standover alike. This bike actually fits the bill, so it fits a lot better than, let's say, a small or even an extra small, traditional adult extra small 27.5-inch bike. This is essentially a double extra small Neuron, which is in the Canyon regular line of bikes. So you can actually get the women's version of this in the aluminum frame, the same frame, in a double XS, a double extra small, and you can get various builds associated with it. This is just one build in two sizes, extra small and double extra small. This is the double extra small. And while you're looking at 27.5-inch extra small and double extra small bikes for kids, don't forget there's a bunch of good 26-inch bikes for kids that are made specifically for them in their size. But hey, it's noticeable, the extra wheel size. It maintains speed, it helps them get up and over obstacles a bit better, like roots and rocks. My time with this bike, it's been pretty good. But I will say I definitely have some gripes about the build they chose, and we'll get into that a bit later. So the geometry is quite good for a trail bike for kids. It has a 67-degree head angle, so it's not too crazy. It's not gonna be floppy at low speeds. It has 430 millimeter chainstays, both this extra small and the extra small bike. And you know, the reach is 378 millimeters, so that's right in line with what I want to see for my 10-year-old, or you know, that 140 centimeter to 155 centimeter height kid, which is the recommended height for this bike. So it has a minimum seat height of 18.8 inches. It has a standover about 29.5 inches, and the stack's about 580 millimeters. That's a pretty high stack, and the reason it's so high is most likely they spec a 29-inch fork on here, and I suspect that's just to keep the handling characteristics the same with the bigger size bikes in the Neuron range. I don't know. So on the topic of that fork, the spec is a RockShox Judy silver. It's 130 millimeter travel. I'm not into this fork. I'm already looking for a different fork. I'm actually looking for a 27.5-inch fork, maybe in 150 millimeter travel with similar axle to crown, so that I don't affect the geometry too much. But this fork's heavy. The damper works okay, the rebound damper. It does have compression lockout, but it's just really heavy, and it's small stanchions, those steel stanchions. I just wish they would have jumped up to a Reba and added a couple $100 on the price. It would have been much better for kids. Another gripe is the SRAM SX stuff they spec, so the drivetrain is pretty much all SRAM SX, including the cranks, the cassette, shifter, derailleur. It's just heavy, and you know, doesn't necessarily need a 12-speed cassette on here with a 32th front chainring. I'd much rather see like a 11 or 10-speed lower range cassette spec with something like a 28-tooth front chainring, just to get the weight down, and it wouldn't cost too much, I think, in the build. The cranks are 165 millimeters, and that's where you really get the benefit when you're buying the actual Young Hero versus buying the double extra small women's bike, is you get the smaller cranks, so they're 165. Now, I would even probably like to see 155s or 160s on here, but 165s aren't too bad. If you go the adult route, you can get a better build, like with a Fox 34. You can pay for it, of course, but you're also gonna get 170 millimeter cranks. So I don't know, 6.5 dozen the other, really, you're changing something either way. Things like the brakes, the Shimano MT200s, we see that on some other kids' full suspension bikes, like the Reaper. They're decent brakes. I mean, they could be better, but they'll do the job just fine, and you know, maybe you'd upgrade down the road. But it's a lower price brake, so it makes sense to get you know, the bike down in price. And $1,900 is a pretty good price for a full suspension bike. But like I said, you are getting these low-end components on it. In an ideal world, I'd love if these bigger brands that are starting to build full suspension bikes for kids, if they'd offer just a frame. Because then, you know, when we get back to normal times, when you can get parts, we can build this up specifically the way we want. And this bike's awesome. The suspension design, the frame geometry, it's really great. It's just, I'd like to make some changes. The tire spec's pretty good. You get a Rocket Ron on the back and a knobby Nick up front, and that's 2.25 inch tires. I'd probably want to see something a little wider on the front. Maybe they could have spec'd it with a 2.35. It carries speed very well, but I wouldn't mind just a little more grip on the front tire. When you do order the bike online, you get a couple of cool extra features. They throw in a torque wrench and a shock pump for you, which is really nice because you're ready to go right out of the box. So with all those heavier parts on it, it's just over 30 pounds, which is pretty respectable. And as the kids get older, weight doesn't necessarily mean as much as when they're really little, like when they're on a 24-inch full suspension bike. But that just goes to show you there's so much room for improvement to get the weight of this bike down. And it's just so frustrating when you know you can do it, but you got to spend a fortune to do it. If you're paying retail for parts versus they could offer a build that's really good and we would save by them buying all those parts OEM. So it is lacking a dropper on build, but it has the routing just like the rest of the Neuron line of bikes. So you can throw it in. The seat post diameter is 30.9, so readily available seat posts, no problem if you want to add that. Otherwise, just look at the extra small and double extra small adult builds. They actually come with dropper posts. We rode this bike in a lot of different places. The Whistler Bike Park, we took it on our local single track, and it performed really good. The fork actually works. The damper and the air spring do fairly well with kids. It's just heavy, like I said, but no problem like crushing down the descents, and the suspension works fantastically underfoot. The RockShox Deluxe performs great. It's got a climb switch on it if you are climbing and you want to switch it off. It's a 4-bar suspension design that's pretty progressive, so it ramps up right near the top, so the kids aren't going to bottom up harsh when they're airing off things and such. So it worked extremely well, this bike, and I'm happy to have it because it's COVID times, and I actually went out and bought this bike because I couldn't find anything in this size, and this was for one of our neighborhood kids. So it's kind of what I was stuck with, but I'm happy I actually got the bike. A couple of things to look out for is the rear axle uses this Quixel. It's a proprietary Canyon pull-out quick release thing. It's pretty cool, but it did back out on us at the Whistler Bike Park, so I fixed that up with some Loctite, and it's held up reasonably now. But other than that, the bike's performed flawlessly, and like I said, I'm really happy with it. And our 11-year-old tester is doing extremely well on this bike, and we're ripping everything in its path. I still think I may look to get a cheap used, Fox 34 in that 140 to 150 range and a 27.5-inch fork, and then I think this will really open up this bike. And as time goes on, I'll probably replace all of these heavy SX parts and get this bike really light and really ripping. So that's the Canyon Young Hero, the 27.5-inch youth full suspension bike. It's a great frame. It's got room for improvement in the build for sure, but you know what? These days, you can't be picky. They're gonna be available really soon again, so it's an option. For more information on kids' bikes, have a look at our website, www.thebikedads.com, and we'll see you on the trails.